So in this video, we're going to go over some science-backed methods that seem to be very effective at helping a person reduce that visceral fat, which for a lot of people is the reason they have such a hard time getting rid of belly fat. And we're going to go over some studies here, and I'll have links to all these studies in the description below. But just remember that this visceral fat is what they call active fat, and it's metabolically active, and it has the ability to affect our hormones and the way that our body is functioning and create a wide variety of health issues. So we really want to take care of this when it's a problem. And a lot of people say, well, how do I measure this? How do I know if I have visceral fat? And when we look at these studies, most of them are looking at MRIs to see the level of visceral fat. But for most people, they're going to use like a DEXA scan just because that's a lot cheaper and easier to access. But we can also look at just waist circumference to get in some insights into what could be going on. And they say for females, a waist circumference over 35 inches or for males over 40 inches is a really strong sign that you likely have some visceral fat there that could be creating some trouble. So we're going to talk about foods and exercise methods that science has shown can really reduce this visceral fat. I'm not going to dig too far into the science of what creates this, but at the end of this video, I'll point you to our video on the surprising dangers of the wrong types of body fat, where we really dig into that and help you understand what's causing this. But some of those causes, when we're going to take steps to remove this visceral fat, we need to make sure that we're correcting some of the issues that can cause this problem. Things like insulin resistance or insomnia or major sleep deprivation. Stress can create problems with cortisol. And we know that alcohol use is a big problem. So I don't want you to think, oh, I can continue to drink my wine every night and fix this visceral fat problem. I want you to be realistic. I'm not going to lie. I don't care if you don't like me. I'm going to tell you, you got to stop it. You got to be a grown-up and set that aside if you want to fix this. And this is why you hear so many people having alcoholic fatty liver issues because of the problems that are coming from this visceral fat that can lead to this ectopic fat, which is that fat stored in our organs that kind of makes them not really work the way they're supposed to. So we're going to have to take some serious steps if we're drinking alcohol and such. High fructose corn syrup, we really got to cut that, which means processed foods are going to be a big deal. And we also want to avoid seed oil. So I talk about these things a lot more in the other video, but I just want to make sure you understand before we talk about these diets and exercise things that are really going to optimize the removal of this visceral fat, you got to do this stuff. If this is a problem and you don't know how to fix it, we'll have videos in the description below on these topics that'll help you understand how to correct things like insulin resistance and insomnia and such. But those things have to be handled if you want to see really results. So now let's look at what would be the optimal diet to help reduce this visceral fat. Because it's important to understand that the steps that will help remove visceral fat are not the same as the steps that really help reduce body fat. A person can reduce body fat a lot and not reduce visceral fat at all. And a person can reduce visceral fat and the scale may not change at all. So we don't want to just look at the scale. We want to look at measurements to understand if we're really getting rid of that visceral fat. So let's look at this study here on dietary intake of carotenoid-rich vegetables reduces visceral adiposity in obese Japanese men. And this study showed that when people increased the level of carotenoid-rich vegetables that they were bringing in, that had the ability to help reduce that visceral fat load. So carotenoid-rich vegetables are going to be things like carrots and bell peppers and squash, and just the colorful vegetables and fruits are usually going to have a higher level of these carotenoids. And just keep in mind that these are fat-soluble nutrients. So to really get all the benefits out of them, you would want to consume these with some type of dietary fat. You also want to make sure that your bile is flowing correctly, and we talk about that in a lot of videos about digestion. But understanding this fat-soluble aspect can be important when you're trying to get fat-soluble nutrients out of the foods that you're eating. But the study that I really want to dig into when we're looking at really optimizing the diet was this one on the effect of high polyphenol Mediterranean diet on visceral adiposity. And they basically took 3 different diets, and they used like a healthy diet, they called it, but then they used a Mediterranean diet, and then they used an optimized Mediterranean diet where they really increased the level of polyphenols in that diet. And over 18 months, they found that the weight loss itself was moderate, but when it went to the visceral fat, they found that the healthy diet, they had lost 4.2%. With the Mediterranean diet, they lost 6%. And with the optimized Mediterranean diet, they lost 14.1% of their visceral fat. So more than double than the other diets. So increasing these polyphenols seemed to be a very effective move. And the people in this study felt like part of what was going on was that when your good gut flora process these polyphenols, they create hippuric acid and urolithin A. And both of these compounds have the ability to tell the body to burn visceral fat. So if you have some type of dysbiosis or bad gut flora situation, you might need to correct that to really get the benefits from this. And if you don't know how to understand if that's a problem, or if you have digestive symptoms but you're not sure what's going on, we'll have the link in the description below for our video on full digestive reset, and that'll kind of walk you through optimizing that situation so you can get the benefit from these polyphenols. But one of the steps that they took to really raise the polyphenol levels is that they had the participants in this study drink 3 or 4 cups of green tea each day. And some people feel like the matcha powder form of green tea can be even more effective because you're getting that whole leaf in there. But if somebody really likes green tea, I feel like that's an okay situation too. But you're also raising what are called catechins in the body, and that has the ability to also tell the body to burn visceral fat. So these are the compounds that seem to be creating the results that they're seeing. So they had people drink the green tea, but they also had them drink a shake made out of Wolfia globosa, and this is like a water plant that you find in Southeast Asia. But here in the States, you have the ability to sometimes get like frozen cubes of it, or you can get a powdered form. And the powdered form seems to have the ability to lift the polyphenols as well. They also had people eat a handful of walnuts each day. And with these steps, with the green tea and this Wolfia globosa and the walnuts, most of the people were increasing their polyphenol intake by about 800 milligrams per day. And that seemed to be able to have the ability to create some real results. Now, they also asked people to limit their red meat intake. And in that other video, I talked about how saturated fats, when mixed with sugar or starches, seems to have the ability to increase visceral fat. Now, this doesn't mean that red meat is bad or that red meat causes you gain weight. That's a fictional viewpoint that a lot of people hold. But when we're looking at losing the actual visceral fat, remember some of the steps are going to be a little bit different. So you might want to reduce the fattier, higher saturated fat type cuts of red meat. Like maybe you don't have so many ribeyes, maybe you have some of the more lean cuts of meat while you're trying to implement these processes to reduce the visceral fat. Now, if somebody is on like a carnivore diet or a keto diet and they're having a lot of saturated fat, I view their body processing differently during that time. I don't see this to be as problematic because they're taking a lot of steps to lose body fat in itself, and that has the ability to lead to some success with visceral fat as well. But in this study, they had people reduce red meat, so you just might want to keep that saturated fat in mind if you're also eating plenty of carbohydrates and sugars and such. So that's the meal aspect. Now let's look at this exercise aspect. And we'll look at this study on mobilization of visceral adipose tissue related to the improvement in insulin sensitivity. And in this study, they found that they could reduce visceral adipose tissue by 48%, where the normal subcutaneous adipose tissue only went down by 18%. And the individuals didn't really lose a lot of weight on the scale, but they lost a lot of visceral fat. So the way that they were doing this is they were having people do moderately intense exercise for about 45 minutes twice a week, and then maybe one interval type training one other day per week. And they saw these significant results. And when we look at this other study on effects of various exercise types on visceral adipose tissue, they said the ranking showed that aerobic exercise with vigorous intensity and HIIT or high intensity interval training had the highest probability of being the best exercise intervention for improving visceral fat. So they found that it was even better than resistance training. Now there's a lot of benefits that come from resistance training, but when it comes to the visceral fat, people saw better results when they were doing more of this aerobic type exercise or some type of high intensity, or maybe like you're running or sprinting for a minute and then walking very slow for 2 or 3 minutes, and you do those intervals like that. Or doing some type of moderate intensity aerobic activity for about 45 minutes. And you can kind of monitor this just by your ability to talk. If you can have a conversation but you're a little bit winded, then you're probably in that moderate intensity level. If you have to kind of stop to breathe and you can only say a few words at a time, you're probably doing more of a high intensity exercise. So you just want to be in the more moderate range for 45 minutes, or a HIIT exercise workout could probably be just 15 to 30 minutes since it's going to be a little bit more intense. But from these studies, people were seeing good results with this optimal diet, and people were seeing good results with these different types of exercise plans. So if you're able to combine those two things, you really have the ability to reduce this visceral fat, which can improve a wide variety of health issues and make you fit into your pants again. Just be sure to clear any of these changes with your doctor. Remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice. I'm basically a professional stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when I lost my voice for 8 years and 23 different doctors couldn't figure that out, I had to dig for my own answers. So now I take that information, and for 20 years I've been teaching health professionals how to help their clients fix the actual underlying causes of problems instead of just covering up the symptoms. But we'll have all these links to these studies in the description below so you can go through and figure out the right questions to ask your doctor. A person could also put variations in there just by like increasing more polyphenol rich foods like berries and like red onions and artichoke and things that are really supplying the body with these polyphenols. Now, if you're a person that's already eating pretty well and you're not eating all this junk and you're still having trouble getting rid of this belly fat, and maybe you're also having trouble adding muscle tissue, or maybe you're losing a lot of muscle tissue, we'll have a link in the description below for our video on why your skinny fat is not about your diet, and there are other aspects that we go over there that can create this kind of trouble as well. But if you want to understand the science behind what creates these issues, then you can jump over right now and check out our video on the shocking dangers of the wrong types of body fat. And if you want to know more about reducing insulin resistance issues, you can check out our video on 5 steps to reduce insulin resistance. I can't wait to hear about your results.